Okay, I think we'll make a start now. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this second day of the BIOPAMA Pacific virtual workshop training on other effective area-based conservation measures. Good to have you all with us today, and hope you've had been well rested from last night and ready to go with the sessions for today. For the benefit of those who couldn't join us yesterday, I just want to give a very brief recap on the introductory sessions yesterday. And that's basically what it was. We had a lot of good presentations from our resource people, attempting to look at what OECMs are and how they would apply in the Pacific context. A lot of good opportunities there, especially for the region in terms of progressing areas that are under customary law, with the knowledge that a lot of the land and some of the marine areas, coastal marine areas, are largely under customary ownership with communities and with traditional governance systems. So this is quite an important issue for us across the region. And I think we need to really understand it thoroughly, the implications of applying these. I think we had some good points that came out of the introductory presentations yesterday. I think Stacy Jupiter of WCS, she did mention and outline quite a lot of opportunities in moving forward with the OECM identification and the support here in the region, but also some of the challenges that could be faced. And I guess in some of these are quite go back to or are related to some of the conventional challenges that we do face with engaging communities and empowering them as well for natural resource management linked to livelihoods and community development. We also had an introduction to the online database managed by UNEP WCMC. And this is where the reporting part to the global level in terms of OECMs, once we establish a good system moving forward to identify and support such areas in the region, the next step would then be to make sure that there is adequate reporting, effective reporting systems up to the global level, because that's where we are quantified as a region in terms of the progress that we're making against global protected area targets. And as you all know, that OECMs are not separated from protected area targets at the global level. They are embedded quite nicely into Aichi Target 11. And so, again, we had some really good discussions yesterday, and I hope that you all, or those of you who were online yesterday, will keep track of the questions that you had asked, and that some of that will keep you thinking into the sessions that we have today, which is more, we will be going straight into more of the content, more into the meat of the discussion, getting you engaged and starting to think about, and move these further within your own national planning. With those words, I'd like to hand it over to Harry Jonas, for the second item on our agenda, which is identifying categories of potential OECMs for the region. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, Great. Well, good morning to you all in the Pacific. And today, thank you very much, Vi, for the introduction as well to what we're going to be doing today. This idea on the screen here, we're going to be talking about identifying, starting to identify these places as OECMs. Yeah, this is just simply meant to convey that this can seem daunting when we first begin this, but I really hope that over the next 2 hours, we are going to start understanding what the CBD criteria are very simply, and already start applying the criteria to real places in the region. That is what we're going to do for the next 2 hours. So what we're going to be doing is, you saw this slide yesterday. The document on the left-hand side is a document that some of you, I'm sure, will look at already. It just explains to you much of much of what we did yesterday, really. That's a good way of describing it. Sort of the background, what are the criteria, and some information about reporting OECMs as well. The right-hand side is this document that's a work in progress, and that is a methodology that you can use very soon to start to assess whether sites in the Pacific meet the OECM criteria. And as I said yesterday as well, I really hope starting to further develop that in your own way, guidance in your own way, new types of guidance and different kinds of tools as well. Of course, drawing on what already exists, but that'll be really important. So we're going to be focusing, if you want to think of it like that, was focusing on sort of what's contained in the document on the left-hand side. Today, we're going to start looking at this more directly applicable methodology. Okay. Right, if you can see that at the very top of your screen, what I'm going to run you through is the main steps set out in that methodology. And then I will situate us within that, because we're not doing all the steps today. Very obviously, we're going to focus on the top bit. So the first step we suggest anybody who is planning on engaging with OECMs is to do some preparation. And there's a whole range of preparation we've suggested in there. Of course, part of that is to read that first document you just had on screen, and of course, to attend some training such as the one we're running at the moment. So that would be the kind of preparation step. And then there is this step we're going to be working on today. It's the screening tool. So basically the screening tool is just a really simplified version of the criteria that anybody can use, even from afar, to start saying to oneself, is this site or that group of sites a bit like an OECM? Is it enough like an OECM that we should invest further time in working there? And we call places that look a bit like an OECM from afar, we call them potential OECMs. So, and that's the work we're going to do. I'm obviously going to come back to this. So here's the thing. There's some sites somewhere in the Pacific, in the countries from which you're from or work in. And you might say, okay, let's have a look at, whether we think these are potential OECMs. You use the screening tool. Again, it's a simplified version of the criteria. And by applying those simple criteria, you get an initial answer. Yes, the site looks like a potential. It looks like it's got potential. Or this really doesn't look like an OECM at all. We'll be wasting our time if we to do a full assessment. But you shouldn't therefore give up on that site. It doesn't mean that site's not worthy in a lot of other ways, including its conservation potential. It just might mean for one or other reason, it's probably not a potential OECM. You, by the end of today, will have used the screening tool. you will have used it on real sites in the Pacific, and you will be able to speak very eloquently to some of the questions that arise when applying the screening tool. So that's what we're doing today. If a site looks like a potential OECM, and whoever has developed that would like to move forwards, including members of the governance authority itself, you can self-apply. If you're the governance authority, you can use that methodology in your own area. It definitely doesn't have to be always outsiders doing these assessments, working with others to run the assessment. So the all-important step 3 is that to move forwards with any assessment, the governance authority must give their consent. They must either collectively agree, or they must agree vis-a-vis, or with regard to other people who want to run those assessments for them or with them. The consent might not be given. If it isn't given, an assessment should not take place. That's a very, very important principle. And for Indigenous peoples, that's referred to as the right to free, prior, and informed consent. But actually, all stakeholders, by the CVD decision, have the right to object or to withhold consent for an assessment. But where that consent is freely given, or where the governance authority themselves choose to move forwards with some kind of a self-assessment, that site then becomes what we refer to as a candidate OECM. It is now in the pipeline, as it were. Consent is there for an assessment. An assessment can take place. That is where a much more rigorous form of the screening tool, if you want to put it like that, is applied. It looks a lot like the screening tool for obvious reasons. It's got the same core criteria that are referenced in the CVD decision, but of course, now that assessment will be, first of all, at the site. Can't be done from somewhere miles away. It should be at the site. Wherever appropriate, involve the governance authority, not just at the consent level, but doing the assessment. Traditional knowledge, local institutions should be fully taken into account with that. And again, all of those safeguards, it's one way to call them safeguards, or stipulations, are in the CVD decision. I think it's really important. Again, in an era of rights-based approaches to conservation, we have a decision on OECMs that genuinely embodies and articulates those standards, I think, very, very clearly. So one would then apply the assessment tool, and you would get a final outcome. Yes, the site is an OECM. That's a great outcome. Or no, the site is not an OECM. What's important there is that this full assessment will have helped everybody involved to identify where the site is meeting the criteria, of course, where the site is not meeting the criteria, and therefore it might move into this middle section, which is would the site or others like to help enhance that site vis-a-vis these criteria. So I think, yeah, so that's kind of what happens. So friends, that is the whole picture. And that, if you were to open this draft methodology at the moment, that's what you'd see. You'd see those 4 steps and a bit of guidance as well, sending you back up to reporting if the area is an OECM. So as I said, today's whole session is focusing on step 2, is applying the relatively simple screening tool to areas in the Pacific, and you will be coming back to us by the end of the session to say, yes, we think this or this area is, or perhaps is not a potential OECM having applied the screening tool. So that's what we're going to do. Great, so that's what we're going to do. Let me just pause there. What you're now looking at is the first page of the PowerPoint that you have been sent, and my bad, I needed to make a couple of changes to the original that Vi had sent you. So he has circulated a new document, and the end of that file name says final 2. So please, if you haven't already done that, go back to your emails and download that. And the resource people will also check in on this when you kick off this now. But that's what it should look like when you download it. And this is the OECM exercise. This is the next page of it, and it just sets out some really simple instructions. You're going to be broken up into country groups wherever possible. We'll explain those in a minute. Please work through this resource methodologically, and we've got some resource people who will help you with that. And you will have a rapporteur, so that you'll see some instructions in a minute, but you'll have a rapporteur who will start writing into these PowerPoints. Here is a resource for people who are doing this offline. I don't think you'll probably be looking at that document, but it's there if you need it. And then what you're about to do is just part 1. So we are about to break you up after a little bit more instructions, and you're just going to work on part 1 for about 15 minutes. And part 1 is at the highest level as we get more and more detailed and more specific. So what we're first going to do is identify categories of potential OECMs, not single places, but categories. And let me show you what that looks like. Just move this. Here, I've given you the definition of an OECM again, so it's really easy to reference what that definition is. And then what I'm going to ask, what we're asking you to do, is to start developing a non-exhaustive list of types of areas found in your country that are outside PAs and might include potential OECMs. And so examples of these categories are things like community forests, LMMAs, watersheds, and other kinds of places. But what you can hear from the examples I'm giving is they're categories. They're not this specific community forest or this specific watershed. If you want to start going there in the session, in this one, you can do that as well. But at the moment, categories is great. And just as a suggestion, we've run this a few times. People sometimes like to organize their lists. You could do it by governance type, by kind of government areas you can think of, and privately governed areas you can think of, or you could do it by terrestrial, freshwater, marine, or however you want. So this page is where you'll write into. And that's all you're going to do. It's just that bit. So when you come back, this page here will have a series of examples of these categories set out, as simple as that. I will ask in a minute if there are any questions, but to recap, this is what you'll do. We're going to break you up into country groups. We're going to, where relevant, if you all know each other, roll with it. If there is anybody who's been added to your group who you don't know for whatever reason, or the resource person perhaps, then you can introduce yourselves. Choose a rapporteur who will take some simple notes. Ideally, this won't be the resource person. And then you'll complete part 1. And the rapporteur will just write your answers into this slide, as simple as that. And then come back. And what we'll do is we'll ask one or other group to share where they've got to. And we'll start to already hear, within the half an hour of us starting this, we'll already start to hear some examples of categories of OECMs in the Pacific. So let me pause there. Vi, let me come back to you. From your perspective, was that clear enough? And or to any of the participants, do you have any questions about the exercise?
Thank you, Harry. I think the instructions are quite clear, unless there's any aspect that the participants would like further clarification on as we go into the breakout groups. So I throw it over to the participants to see if there are anything that's not very clear with the instructions that are on the screen. If there's anything that it's not clear to you, yeah, please feel free to raise your hand or put your clarification in the chat window.
Great. And we can also obviously ask questions within the group as well. We can kick that off as we go. So in which case, that's really good. Let's please, Laura, break us up or then into our groups. And we'll have 15 minutes if we can all sort of check in again at 15 minutes and see where we've got to. Laura, maybe you can check in at sort of 12 or so and see whether we need lots more time or whether we're doing well.
Yes, sure.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. Maybe I can just check in. Should that be everybody back in the room already?
Yep.
Looks like it. Awesome. Okay, great. Friends, thank you so much for kicking this off. What we're going to do now is hear from one or two groups, all if you're keen. To just hear some of the examples that you have, started to think about. So who would one of the groups particularly like to go first? You can share your screen and you can pull up that slide and you can give us some of the examples, or you can just speak to them if you prefer. Do we have a volunteer?
I'm happy to throw up my hand this morning.
Brilliant. Also, introduce yourself so we also all know who you are. Thank you so much. Over to you.
No worries. Are we on the thing yet?
Wow, look at that. Great.
I am. Good morning, folks. Nate Peterson here from the Nature Conservancy, working out of Brisbane, helping everybody in the Pacific as much as I can, chasing protected areas. So, I'm assuming my screen is showing. It looks like it is. So our group, we had mostly PNG, and then we had 2 gals from Fiji. So it was a nice mix. Of course, LMMAs are top of the list. Then there's some community forest areas that are scattered around the country. Tamboo sites, of course, would be both in PNG and Solomons, I'm sure, and Fiji as well. There's some culturally significant and UNESCO cultural sites that are up in the some sort of up on the highlands. A key activity that TNC's been using quite a bit in northern parts of the country are these plumps. So participatory land use management plans. So it's really working with the community to identify a number of different zones within their tenure, where they might have a zone for conservation, a zone for agriculture, a zone for hunting, et cetera, et cetera. So at the moment, those plumps fit underneath like a local level law, but it'd be good to raise them up under OECMs. That's my phone. High conservation value sites, those are a good opportunity because they're identified already through the oil palm sector. And they've been evaluated and they have some scientific backing to them. So I think that's probably a low-hanging fruit. Mazzella and Ruth are both heavily engaged in this mangrove market mirroring project. That's what the M acronym is there. It's a bit early for them, but perhaps once they get that going, those managed mangrove habitats would be something similar to the LMMA schema. Our friends from Fiji identified some unique landscapes, these peat swamps that are in some parts of Fiji. Kind of going back to the military sites, which is, so the current military sites, there might be a few in PNG, probably unlikely in Solomon's, not sure about Fiji. Related to the current military sites, there's these World War II historical sites. Certainly in Papua New Guinea is the Kokoda Track, which is kind of a big package of features there, lots of activity. Of course, we all know about dive sites that are scattered around the Pacific, where there would be some wreckage that maybe they could get put under OECMs. And I added one when our group just closed off, and that's these conservation deeds, which is another low-hanging fruit, as those are agreements that have, there's a few of those conservation deeds that are set up in Madang on the north coast of the country, that the communities agreed to it, and with some documentation, and that could be probably tagged as an OECM. So I'll stop there. I hope my list is clear and provide some input to the group. Thank you so much.
Nate and your group, thank you so much. That's really, it's great to see that list already blossoming. Yeah, if you want to de-share your screen, I'd like to invite one other group. If there is another group, I think that was great already. That was, we just wanted to see at least what one group was doing. But if there is another group that's very keen on updating us on some of your thinking, please step forwards now. Or if you're keen, we can carry on going and get into parts 2 and 3. Is there another group that's keen? I'm looking at the chat here.
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, we can.
All right. Would it be, do you want me to share my screen, or is it okay for me to just speak over?
You can do either, up to you, whatever you prefer.
Okay. I'm just going to discuss a few of the points that we discussed in our little group. So here in Tonga, I'm going to use 2 points and using Tonga as an example. And then I also have Junie, who shared from Samoa. But first, our first point was the potential zones in the current ocean policy and marine managed areas here in Tonga. We have local marine protected areas. And then we also have up in Vava'u on one of the main islands, we have a no-go zone for whale watch operators where they are not allowed to go and have interactions with the whales. So this could be seen, or it could fall under the umbrella for OECMs, am I correct? And then with our terrestrial, we also have the Tolo Rainforest Reserve, as well as Nursery Mangrove Site in Papua. And then we also have one more, which is a newly found plan, the Whangauta Steward Plan. It involves all the communities around the lagoon area here in on our main island, Tongatapu. Also, something that Jenny shared from Samoa was that there's this hiking spot that has potential, and it also falls under the umbrella of the OECM. So those were just a few points that we were able to discuss in our group. Handing it over back to you, Harry.
Yeah, that's great. Again, amazing to be hearing of all these just really diverse places that are being put forward. So just because we want to be really efficient with the time and your time, we don't want to run over today. We are going to go back into groups just now to carry on where we left off. And let me show you how this looks. All right, great. Our group actually already started talking about some, well, as you did actually just now, but we started already talking about some specific sites and what they might look like. So already in those 2 presentations, you've already heard a list of categories, and you're starting to hear about some specific sites. We're going to spend the rest of today working on a particular site of our choosing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in the group is choose that site. As I say here, as we say here, choose one specific site from the list of categories. Yeah, if you listed community forests, choose a specific forest with a name, with a group of people who govern and manage that forest, etc. Okay. What's really important in your groups is you might not find a site that everybody knows really well, but try and find one that more people, you know, the majority of people know something about. That'll make it a more interesting discussion and resource. People, you know, support that process and that thinking. And then in this slide here, very simply, you'll write the name of that site, you know, roughly where it is. Doesn't have to be GPS coordinates or anything like that, just kind of roughly where it is in the country, and who is governing that area. Or it could be more than one authority that's managing or governing and managing, you could call that as well, okay? So you've chosen your site, you've written it in this slide here, and then you're already into part 3, which is applying the screening tool. And I'm just going to show you roughly what these slides look like. They're really initially quite simple. Criterion A from the CBD decision on OECMs simply says, to be an OECM, criterion A site should not be a protected area. And so what you've got here is a question. Is there a strong likelihood that the whole area or the part that we're focusing on, the part being assessed, is outside of a protected area? And you give your response. What you'll notice, and this is all important, is these 2 words here. Because we're not doing the actual assessment, because we haven't got consent and are working on the site, it's okay at this stage to remain up here in the likely. You know, is the site outside a protected area? Yeah, actually, I know it's not included in the state network of protected areas, or I'm pretty sure it isn't. At this stage, that kind of level of certainty is fine. I'll just show you one more, and then I will set you off to do this. Criterion B, governed and managed. Oh yes, weirdly, geographically defined falls under this. So criterion B includes a focus on, is there strong likelihood that the site is geographically defined with agreed boundaries? Do we know the specific area we're talking about? You put your response in, and you will see you can carry on answering questions as you go. We're gonna give you up to half an hour for this. Some of you might swing through this in half an hour, and others of you might only manage a few of these, depending on how much you talk about these things. It doesn't matter if you don't finish the screening tool process, because that's fine. The whole point of this exercise is just for you to start practicing and kind of engaging with it at your own speeds. I just want to show you something. C, D, D, and then there is a results page where you can write your result in. And then it says at the bottom here, participants of the Pacific meeting, please stop here. And I put in an extra side to ask you to stop. In your own time, those of you who are interested in this discussion, you've got some additional resources that talk about consent, that talk about legal recognition, support, and reporting, which are all issues we're going to look at some more tomorrow. So let me pause there and ask if anybody has any questions now in the group about what you're about to do. You're not going to do part 4, so let me not put that on. You're going to do parts 2 and 3. Any questions about what you're going to be doing? Silence is golden. Well, that sounds good. Again, you know, I think it's great for the resource people to kind of go over this a little bit again, orient everybody, work with the rapporteurs, and then start working slowly and at your own pace through that PowerPoint. You're going to have half an hour to do this, and we're on the hour right now, so good luck with it. Enjoy it, and see you back here in half an hour. Thanks very much. I feel for a lot of people, you won't have got as far as you would have liked to. Could I just, so welcome back. I hope that was half an hour and it flew, actually. We also in our group, we'd really just started getting into the issues and already half an hour was up. I'd like to, right, so welcome back everybody. We've just got half an hour left of our session. And what I'd like to do in that half an hour is to hear back from at least a couple of groups from where you got to in the exercise. That would be excellent. And ideally, if we have a little bit of time as well to hear some discussion about the issues, but let's hear back. Let's try, would perhaps one of the groups that has not yet presented, i.e. part one, like to volunteer to present what a little bit of information about the site that you probably started to apply the screening tool to. That will be excellent. Awesome. Yeah, so would somebody like from the Cook Islands like to present? And you can share your screen if you'd like to do that, or you can just speak to the issues. Thank you.
Great, thanks Harry. Kia ora everyone. So my name's Hayley and I'm with the National Environment Service in the Cook Islands with the rest of the team that are on the other call. So I'll just try and share my screen and then you can see what we put together for our area. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, we can. And if you go into presentation mode, we'll see even more of it.
Great.
Yeah, that's
great.
Thank you. Well done.
Okay, so in the previous section, we identified community conservation areas as one of the categories. So for this section, for site specific, we went with the Takatumu conservation area. So this is like I said, a community conservation area here in the Cook Islands that's on our main island of Rarotonga. And it's been established since about the 1980s by 3 landowning families. So it's a privately owned area. And the main reason it was set up was to conserve one of our endemic bird species here, the kakadori. So at the time, there were only about 20 of them left total, and now there's over 500. So it's one of our success stories here in the Cooks. So for the first criteria, looking at whether it's outside of a protected area, it's not formally established as a protected area currently here. It's community driven, so the landowning families have been responsible for its management and they've done very, very well with it. And as I said, it's not formally established or legislated. It's completely down to the landowning families how they choose to manage the area and continue it. So we decided that yes, there was a strong likelihood that it's outside of a protected area. In terms of whether or not it's geographically defined, we said yes, it is. There are boundaries of where the traditional landowning families have their different parts of land, and we have a total area for the TCA of 155 hectares. So yes, it's defined. is there a strong likelihood that the site is under the appropriate authority? So yes, it's private landowners, and they have a trust set up for the area that consists of the 3 families involved. In terms of a management system, so there is a management plan that's been developed for the area, and within that it has recommendations and objectives. The main objective of the area, as I mentioned, is the conservation of an endemic bird species, the kakadori. And so it includes the in situ conservation of that species, and it manages threats, primarily the control of invasive rat species that are predators to the kakadori. Whether or not management is sustained, we decided that for the foreseeable future, so the short, medium term, yes, it is sustained. But a potential threat is that there's no clear succession plan for the management and oversight of the area beyond the current caretaker. So the current manager of the area is very active and very involved. So it would just be a case of ensuring that beyond that one person, other members of the family are also as active. In terms of biodiversity values, we decided that there were important biodiversity values. It's key habitat for an endemic species. And again, that links to the in situ conservation. And there are also other native species present. And then I think it was around here that we ran out of time. Yeah, we just got to this last little part here, again about long-term effective conservation. So we decided yes, it is expected to achieve long-term effective conservation, but that is, we sort of highlighted the effective part of that statement, and that effective conservation is based on ongoing management of threats. And I think that's as far as we got. Yeah. So that was our group discussion from the Cook Islands. Thank you.
Haley, great work, and to you and colleagues, that's wonderful that you had time to consider as much of that in that detail. That's really well done. That's really well done. And we're gonna also ask you all to send us these PowerPoints as well with your your ideas in there as well, which is super useful, so we can capture some of these ideas coming through. Thank you. So we've heard now from it's just 4 groups. And I'm wondering therefore if the group, oh no, there's PNG, isn't there? So was it 5 groups eventually? Sorry, I thought it was.
Yes,
4.
we added a 5th group.
We added a 5th, including Solomon Islands and PNG, correct?
Yes.
Great. Would any of the colleagues from PNG or from my group, Solomon Islands, or ideally both, like to update us on where you got to? And if you didn't get, our group didn't get as far as that, but we had good discussions around the issues, and that's just fine. So I'm just wondering, yes. Alfred, it looks like you're lining up.
Harry, this is Nate Peterson here. I had a question for the group. So I have an advantage in that in July of 2019, I got to go to Samoa and spend some time with Heather and Vi in the group. And we worked through what I understood to be like a draft OECM assessment methodology. Yep. And it was a pretty full-on spreadsheet. I don't know. I've got it here on my screen. It looks like there's about 15 different tabs to it. I have that, and I pulled it up, and I could see that it echoes a lot of the questions in this PowerPoint. Is that assessment tool, the spreadsheet, has it been updated, or is that going to be part of the package? Thanks.
Yeah, good question. That we have moved away from the spread. So basically, that spreadsheet, I'm pretty sure, would be the kind of beta version of the current methodology. We've actually gone for more of a Word document look as opposed to, yes, that was the beta version that we use. Yeah, totally, that's ours.
Yeah.
And so we workshopped that actually at a workshop. Heather and others were there as well. And we've got a document which does the same purpose, but has been massively reworked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, cool. I just wanted to pick up on that because I thought that it was a helpful tool to go through. It was, spreadsheets like this are always a bit painful, but
people love them or they hate them.
Yeah, it's good to have a form and you tick all the boxes. To that part, I like it. Yeah, so just wanted to follow up on that and see what things it goes to. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'd happily send you, the current version of the methodology is it's been pulled apart again, but we have got sort of a sign off to be moving forwards maybe in the next couple of months to release another version that people can use and feedback on. What we've decided to do is rather than trying to, quote unquote, finish it, also when people haven't had time to use it and provide feedback, we're going to release a 0.2 version or something like that, so that you plural can start using, so that we've been helpful, we can give you something to use equally. We're not saying it's the finished product, and we can keep revising it as appropriate. Thanks so much for that question of feedback. I'd love now to hear from yes. So Heather, would you be reporting back for PNG group?
No, so
I'm sorry.
Ours was a group of several different countries. So we have Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, Samoa, and Vanuatu.
What is yours?
Yes, so we had some technical problems in my group, which meant that I have ended up being the rapporteur. So apologies, but I'll just quickly run through what we talked about. I want to heavily caveat this with the fact that the example we chose, we did agree that it is in fact within a protected area. So just for everyone to be aware, this site obviously, if we were to go through the full assessment, wouldn't meet the criteria for being considered an OECM because it is already a protected area. But we were a bit short on time, and actually we thought it was kind of a good example if only it wasn't already a protected area. So we thought we would just run through the exercise anyway, just to go through the criteria. But the example is Robert Louis Stevenson's tomb in Samoa. And the reason that it would be quite a good example if it wasn't a protected area is that obviously it's a site that's managed for the purpose of preserving a tomb, which is not conservation of biodiversity, but has positive conservation outcomes. So with the caveat in mind that this wouldn't meet the OECM definition, we chose Robert Louis Stevenson's tomb in Samoa, and the governance authority is the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources. So obviously on criterion A, we do fall down because it is a protected area, but we forged ahead anyway. It does have geographically defined boundaries. They've been defined by the ministry. It's governed and managed by the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment, but also with support from the Robert Louis Stevenson Museum Foundation. So it's a kind of joint governance arrangement. On whether there's a strong likelihood that management results in conservation, we thought that it was very likely. The ministry manages the site, manages the trail that runs up to the site, and oversees the preservation of the tomb, which also has the effect of conserving trees and birds and the general biodiversity of the area. We felt that there was a strong likelihood that the governance and management would be sustained in the long term, provided those authorities remain in place managing it. And that is about as far as we got with our discussion. So we didn't get to the point of discussing biodiversity values, but we made some progress.
Heather, thank you so much. That's really good, and I'm really glad that you did for John. I thought that was smart. As you say, yes, that obviously couldn't be an OECM, but the exercise you ran was really useful. So well done to you and the team there. And so therefore, thank you very much, Laura. The last group is the one that I was privileged to be in, from the Solomon Islands, and it would be, we've got time, it would be wonderful, Alfred, if you wanted to share your screen with us, and if Agnetha, who was the second official rapporteur, and maybe Cynthia, amongst others in the group, would like to run us through where we've got to. And you can share your screen, or you don't have to, you can just describe it. Thanks.
Hi, hi everyone. So my apologies. I clicked on one of the links on the chat group for the participants list, and my computer just shut down, and I had actually switched it on again. But I can't. I didn't save the PowerPoint presentation. However, I remember what I had written, so I'll try my best to recall, and then the rest of the Solomon Islands team could actually add on or correct me if I said something that is wrong or missed out on something. So. If that is okay, the name of the location that we had discussed is the Congolai watershed area, and this is located within the Guadalcanal province, and also in Honiara as well. And the area is an important area because it supplies water. That is the water source for Honiara. It is currently, there's an agreement that exists between the ministry responsible for the water, as well as with the community, the land owning community. And this agreement is covers the use of the area where the water infrastructure is built, and this includes the dam, the water pipes, and the roads that actually connect, that goes up to the dam and the water source. But the entire catchment goes beyond the boundaries of Honiara into the neighboring province, and that is the only agreement that exists. It's quite an important area, and our group discussed and think that because of the existing governance, there is not yet. Sorry. So first of all, the area does not fall within a protected area, but there are discussions to see if the area can be put under protection. And because of the existing arrangement and the use of the area by the land owning units, it has the potential to be put as an OECM area. So if that is going to be the case, there is an opportunity and potential to actually work with the communities as well as with government in terms of some form of mapping exercise to identify and demarcate the boundaries of the Congolai catchment area that will fall under the OECM. The governance structure is mostly with the land owning units of the area of the catchment. And also that the existing agreement between the government and the land owning units with regards to the use of the watershed for the water source. And I think that is what we have managed to discuss before we had to leave the breakout room. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry to hear. I mean, in the circumstances, you did great. I'm just going to invite Agnetha in the first instance, seeing as you were joint rapporteur, if you would like to add anything.
Thank you, Harry. I think Alfred has done a very good job. I think that's where we've reached. It's just that the Kongulai water catchment area is not yet defined as a management area. It's just loosely managed on an ad hoc basis by the Ministry of and frequent meetings between the Ministry of Environment, the Forestry, and the Ministry of Mines, which Water Resources Department sits under, as well as the Solomon Islands Water Authority here based in Honora, who is managing getting the water source out to Honora residents. But the overall catchment area is not yet protected. And there's also issues on unsustainable logging within the water catchment area. So there's maps that are sitting within with the Solomon Islands Water Authority. There's maps by the Ministry of Environment, and then there's maps that belongs to the water resource. So in actual fact, there's not a concise management authority around that area, but there's a potential to have it. So this is where it's an ongoing debate at the national level as well as at the Honora City Council, which we thought would be another key player within the governance structure as well. And having the key on land owning groups having greater role in managing the overall watershed area. So that's where we're at, and having this assessment being done on a site like Kongulai, it would be equally important for other water sources that the Water Authority has in other provincial areas around Solomons, as well as other water sources that they've installed around the Honiara city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That adds a lot. And one of the things that came up in our discussion as well, or our discussion highlighted the benefit of having a methodology which, in the sense that it's a diagnostic tool, as I mentioned before. So it really, in our context, showed us that the lack of total specificity around the geographic boundaries may be something to look at. Basically, it kind of raises the issue and brings that to people's attention. So friends, unbelievably, I can hardly believe the time, but we have rolled through almost 2 hours. I just wonder if there are any burning comments you would like to make before I hand back to Vi to close us up for the day. Is there anything very, very specific you'd like to mention about this exercise or the screening tool, or any epiphanies about OECMs that have come to you before we move towards closing and start looking ahead to tomorrow? Which is fine. That's great. Okay. Well, I think
Eric,
you've done really.
Sorry, can I
go on.
throw one out there?
Yeah, sure.
So this we talked a bit about this yesterday, and then going through it today, kind of put some more thoughts to me about it. So we have nationally recognized protected areas that like the national government has some oversight to and agrees to put into the WDPA and such. And like PNG and Solomons at least have policies of some sort in some state that kind of recognize those protected areas. Where do the OECMs fit in? Because it doesn't seem like there's a national legislation, and we talked a bit about that yesterday and how that'd be a real burden to develop that. So what's the go? I mean, so if a community up on the coast says, yeah, we've got a little community protected area, and some NGO came in and helped us determine that it fits as an OECM, and then are they just kind of sidestepping the national government to have their site fall under this OECM designation? It just seems like there's this, we're sidestepping the national government. Not and for better or for worse. But am I interpreting that right, or is there a discussion on that today or perhaps tomorrow? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's a great question. We are going to talk about that some more tomorrow. Heather, though, I'll bring you in. Would you like to speak, yes, to exactly that issue? Thank you.
Sure. So, yeah, it's a great point. I think, so in the context of reporting data to the Protected Planet Initiative and to the World Database on OECMs, we do encourage, so governments are our primary data providers. They provide most of the information that we have. We encourage other actors to provide data, particularly as it helps us to build up the data sets that are less complete, and those are in particular the data sets on areas managed by private actors, by Indigenous peoples and by communities. However, in the vast majority of cases, the data still needs to be verified by the national government before we're able to add it to the databases. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but they don't really apply in the Pacific region. So I think I'd encourage governments and other stakeholders to think about the kind of full diversity of OECMs in their countries and work together to map those and to report data. But yeah, I mean, Harry, I don't know if you maybe have anything to add to that, or
I'd like to say, yes, I do, and we can, and we'll talk about this some more tomorrow. But again, I think what's really interesting about this is maybe the way Heather set it up is it sidestepping governments, or is it supporting and further contributing to what is a collective effort on this issue? And I think that's exactly the kinds of conversations that will usefully take place in national, subnational contexts. And again, one of my comments yesterday was, can the introduction of this framework, OECMs, lead to positive changes? In a sense that I know that word disruptive is probably overused these days, but can a change in a system lead to positive, progressive advancement? And I think so that maybe one way to sort of answer your question is not so much the answer is this or this. The question is how could the introduction of OECMs in any one of the any nation around the world lead to the kinds of changes we'd like to see, bringing, making conservation more inclusive, more collaborative, that kind of thing. So that's, I'm sending the challenge back to you. So friends, we really are at the end of the hour. So there's lots more to discuss. Via is going to introduce what we're going to do tomorrow, which is going to include looking some more at that question. Thanks very much for your active engagement in the exercise today. That was great. Thanks.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, colleagues, for the interesting and constructive discussions today. As you have familiarized initially with the OECM criteria and screening information. So that brings us to the end of day 2, and thank you again for your active engagement. Just a kind reminder, if you haven't filled in the participant list, the link to the Google Doc where it is in the chat window. Appreciate it, and I'm very grateful if you can input your details there in the participant list. But I will leave the introduction to tomorrow's session for tomorrow in the interest of time, because I know the day is moving on and you have other plans, work plans to get on to. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again early tomorrow morning for the day 3 session. Thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.